Ladies and gentlemen, this young man has a very promising future. Dan Kaminski.
That has been a fun day. How you guys been? So, all right. I'm Dan. I am here for my 10th year doing this thing. All sorts of fun. Which means it is, of course, Grandma's 6th year doing this. Also, which means there are, of course, cookies. You get 1 cookie for a great question and 2 cookie if you hacked the shit out of me. So my whole thing, my whole thing is to take a look at what I consider to be foundational elements of internet security. So SSH, TCP/IP, DNS, same origin policy, DNS, visual pattern recognition and binary data. That's a foundational element. DNS, pattern obsession. I'm sorry, it's just so much fun. So this year, I'm starting to address what I call the crisis of authentication. Vulnerabilities and O-Day gets all the press, but at the end of the day, when you actually look at the data from Verizon Business, you see about 60% of compromises come from really stupid shit. No passwords, bad passwords, default passwords, my passwords. Why are we still dealing with this technology that is screwing us this royally badly? Well, the thing is they work, which is more than I can say for some of the competition. Passwords are used because they scale really well individually. The problem is that they completely collapse as soon as the scale goes across any period of time or across any period of number of hosts that you need to speak to. Human memory is just so very limited. So there are 2 schools of thought for what to do about it. The first school of thought is try harder. We'll have machine-generated passwords. We'll rapidly cycle them. We will literally use leet speak as a security technology. No matter what you do in that department, you are still ridiculously vulnerable to keyboard sniffing attacks, and that is just not going away. There's a second school of thought that says, guys, we can eliminate passwords entirely if only we can find a way to get humans out of the memory business. Now, what was supposed to fix this problem was PKI, public key infrastructure, with the technology X509. And it hasn't been working very well. But the constant quote we've been hearing for a decade is, if we only cared enough, we could stop using passwords and have smart cards for everyone. So I found this image on the internet, which I think summarizes as perfectly as possible my position on this thought. If we only could find a big enough Care Bear, we could totally ride this pony. Okay, guys, business has cared enough about PKI to invest hundreds of millions of dollars into the dream. The reality is, this is not the fault of the business guys. They put their money where their mouth was. I've been taking a long, deep look at X509. And I'm going to tell you, as an engineer, there are things wrong with it. There are things wrong with it structurally, and there are things wrong with it technologically. The reality is this is security technology that we developed and finished in the 90s. We didn't do security very well in the 90s. We really do need something of a reboot. And if you've noticed, I've been talking a lot about DNSSEC as the technology that's going to allow us to do this reboot. Now you're going to hear why for the last couple of months I've been so down on the technology. Now, I do want to be clear. There are those who think we should build some kind of magic new internet, which would just not have any of these security problems. This is not going to work. The analogy I use is it's similar to suggesting, why don't we build cities without roads or highways in the middle of a forest? It'll be great. It'll have amazing mass transit. It will also not work. It will not be enough. You must have solutions that integrate into the real world. But what we're doing now is not working. It is just not offering what we need to secure authentication. So I got to warn you guys, if you are a elite hacksaw, you're going to be incredibly bored by the next 10 or 15 minutes. To deal with that, I'm going to show you the quote that spawned this talk and show you what this talk spawned. The exact quote was given to me after CCSC of last year, was from Meredith Patterson, and she says, I'm going to go home and figure out the precise grammar of a certificate and see just what I can put in there. This was an extension of her principle, which said if your specification contains a grammar and your implementation does not directly implement that grammar, your implementation is wrong. Well, she told me this, and I pretty much realized she was probably on to something. And so we're at Black Hat with a cert for DEF CON. That's actually real. Now, I would never ask you guys to believe me when I say that this is a real cert for DEF CON. Alex, would you mind coming up? Alex, would you vouch this is from a real-world certificate authority?
Hi, this is Alex Soderov. Now, Dan and I have slightly different approaches to handling security research, and I'm typically not. I typically don't shy away from embarrassing certificate authorities when they screw up, but Dan is not me. So he asked me to take a look at the certificate and vouch that it is real and it actually works, without revealing the certificate authority behind it. And I can vouch that, yes, I did take a look at it, and it really works, and it's real. So
thank you.
Dan can take it from here and explain why this is bad.
So, Grandma, you're going to learn X509. X509,
I thought you loved her, Dan.
Not, as Win Schwarzhaus says, a really good porn. X509 is the identity system behind PKI. It's used for SSL, IPsec, and pretty much everything except SSH. It allows, as a summary explanation, we'll get into this, Grandma, it allows the creation of systems where public keys and subject names of individuals are signed by certificate authorities trusted by many people, such that if you have a specific private key, other people may validate your identity via its matching certificate. It's okay. Translation. Private key, you've got a face. Public key, you've got a passport photo. It's really hard to go from a passport photo to a face. It's really easy to go from a face to a passport photo. The subject name, well, you have a name, Raya. Certificate authority would be the country you live in, United States. Certificate would be a passport. So all X509 is, all that super complicated stuff about private keys is, if you have the face that's in a photo, and it's on a card issued by your country, you have the name, then your name is the name that's on the passport. That's ultimately all X509 is ultimately trying to accomplish. It's the digital version of that. Now, in the real world, there's pretty much only one success story for X509, which is SSL. This is the technology used to secure HTTPS, the web, and I would say probably the greatest advance in computer security, period, was actually whoever figured out in the 90s you could get people to give websites credit card numbers if the crypto guys were happy. And we actually got relatively decent crypto out of this. This is a miracle. In terms of actually deploying strong cryptography, that we did not get into the habit of handing credit cards to websites with no encryption whatsoever is astonishing. Now, there's only about 1 million SSL endpoints. There's a heck of a lot more endpoints for websites than there are SSL. In fact, people are arguing about whether we should even be using encryption for cloud applications. So the entire argument we had about credit cards, we're having to have again about what about the actual applications you're using to handle your personal data. So the walkthrough for how you acquire a certificate. Everyone thinks it starts with going to a certificate authority. It doesn't. It always starts with going to DNS, because the certificate authority has to assert that you have this name, and the name comes out of DNS. So first, you register a name in DNS, providing an email address as the canonical user behind a domain name. You generate then a public and private key pair. This is the face and passport photo of this website that you're going to build. You provide the public key to a certificate authority along with the name of the website that was registered in DNS. This is done with what's called a PKCS10 certificate signing request, or CSR. Certificate authority, well, it sees you have some public key. It sees you'd like to be some particular website. That's great. It goes ahead and runs to DNS. It says, hey, am I actually allowed to give this guy this certificate? It goes to the Whois database, finds out who to mail, gets an email address, goes to DNS, finds out what server, sends them a mail. The link is clicked, and the certificate is issued. Now, you might say, Dan, you're oversimplifying this. I mean, sure, some CAs work like this. Maybe even most CAs work like this, but not all. My CA put me through the ringer. They made me sign all this paperwork, did DUNS lookups, phone calls. Lawyers showed up at my door and made me provide blood samples. Well, this doesn't matter, because the first flaw, X509 cannot exclude without great pain. That means is there are dozens and dozens of CAs out there that are trusted by everyone. Every CA can issue certificates for every single name. This is the direct equivalent of Zimbabwe being able to issue American passports. Look, I like Zimbabwe. I think they're a fine country. I'd like them not to be able to issue my passport. Even if your CA runs you through the ringer, that doesn't mean every other one will. The security of the whole is equal to the security of the weakest link, and anything more, as I'm sorry, because I know these guys and they're very responsible and they try very hard, but if you're more secure than the least secure guy, it's just security theater. So the bad guy just goes to the weakest link. So I'd like to compare that with DNS. DNS is very good at excluding, is very good at making individual entities unable to screw you. DNS, the average name has 3 layers. You have a root. There's one of them. There's not 50. There's a classic quote that the CA system is only as secure as the money they refuse to take. I think it's Peter Gutmann who said that, although I'm probably wrong. Ain't that funny? The root won't actually take your money, at least right now. The root is kind of an adjunct to the state system, and it's really hard to pay China money for them to agree you exist as a country. The second layer are the registries. VeriSign has exclusive control over COM. Affiliates has exclusive control over org. Now, something very interesting happened. First off, VeriSign cannot do anything to org. Only Affiliates can. When one of the TLDs by one of the registries became filled with malware, one registry was responsible, one registry was losing money, one registry was losing reputation, one registry fixed the problem. When you actually have single points of responsibility, you get accountability, which means you actually get action to repair problems. Bad sites were taken off the net by this model. That cannot exist in the CA system because there's always 29 others that could have done the same thing. The final problem, or the final interesting element, are the registrars. These are the organizations you directly speak to when you speak to something in DNS. Listen, this is an astonishing design. What happens is that individual companies, any company can be outsourced the right to manage the customer relationship for an individual name from an individual registry. So COM Network Solutions can issue names from COM. Enom can issue names from COM. Mark Monitor can issue names from COM. VeriSign is the single point that decides which one of those and which only one of those is going to have rights over the name. So if I have, I don't know, a weak registrar out of New Zealand that has a SQL injection attack, I can leave and I can stop being vulnerable to that SQL injection attack. I don't have that capability in X509. And in fact, there are elite registries that all they do is make sure they don't screw up your names and what's registered in DNS. Now, it is possible to exclude in X509. It is possible to say there are too many CAs out there and I don't want to have to worry about them. Well, what you can do then is run a private CA. It's very expensive, it's very difficult to maintain, and it fails in the same way every time. What happens when you need to interoperate with other individuals besides other private CAs? You end up with the Federal Bridge CA. Now, I have nothing but good things to say about this. It is a miracle they got it to work, and everyone involved in the Federal Bridge CA deserves a medal. The rest of us need a system that you don't need to deserve a medal in order to deploy. So there's a theory that some have, which kind of was embedded in the design at the beginning, which said, interoperability doesn't matter that much. I mean, you're usually just authenticating to your own organization. This is just not true. This is geeks who have never worked for large companies in their life speaking to us from back in the 90s with their oversimplification of the world. The way business works, cross-organizational authentication is the rule and not the exception. It's not just partnerships with other companies. It's interactions with other groups. If you think any large company is actually one large company, you've never worked in a large company. The reality is we need a way to interact with remote organizations consistently and reliably using standard technologies. The magic of passwords, and I can't even believe I'm saying those words, is that foobar123 is the same for my organization, as foobar123 is the same for your organization, as foobar123 is everywhere. It's great, you can share these. So, the other problem that organizationally really hits is X509 can't delegate. Every time I need a new certificate for a new node in my organization, I have to go talk to some other company and beg for one and say, oh, please, give me one of these. This is expensive, it's operationally inconvenient, it has potential information disclosure issues, and it integrates obscenely poorly with devices. I'd like to point out, most of your devices have self-signed SSL certs. Most of your devices are in DNS. Why? Because it was just very easy to locally have your local DNS guy, and every group has one because every group has devices because it's been going on since '83. Very easy to have your local guy set something up. Now, this sort of delegation, in X509 it would be to have a local guy. X509 would be, I can issue any certificate for docsparrow.com or blackhat.com. This would require what's called name constraints. That would be the ability to say, a CA gives you the right to sign names for just your section of the DNS namespace. This would be very nice. This is even supported by a few browsers. But it's not supported to the degree that anyone can actually trust that it's deployable. You can't actually buy a delegated signature. Now, there's another option. You could go ahead and have a wildcard cert. I could get a cert for star.docsparrow.com and put it on every device in my organization. And now, I wouldn't need to worry about any delegation at all. I also would have the same cert on every device in my organization. That's not actually a good thing. Now DNS delegates very well. The root delegates to VeriSign for COM. COM delegates to my servers for docsparrow.com. I do whatever I want with docsparrow.com. I don't talk to VeriSign. I don't talk to Network Solutions. I own my chunk of the namespace. I put whatever the hell I want in there, among other people. So, X509 delegation. X509 delegation is in fact possible. It's really painful. There is serious demand for being able to run a certificate authority and a private certificate authority and have your certs valid at other sites. Now, I told you earlier, you can't do this securely without name constraints. So they just don't do it securely. They just sell root certs. What are you going to do? This is all, it's not that they're bad people. It's, they have a customer demand. The customer spent a lot of money on this PKI. Their certs don't work at other organizations. Make them sign something that they'll promise to be good. We ultimately have ended up with a security model where an unknown and unknowable number of companies promise not to create certificates for bankofamerica.com. So, some history. 2008 was not a good year for X509. Mike Zussman actually bypassed Komodo security checks by claiming www.live.com was actually the name of an internal server. And that's not subject to validation at all. He also had a bypass for StartComms checks via web interface hack that I don't actually know. Well, when I broke DNS last year, I broke SSL as well, because as I said, the root of SSL is actually DNS. It has to go for most of the CAs to DNS to actually authenticate you. I knew I had done that, and mine is kind of patched, mostly patched, majority patched. BGP is not going anywhere. Avi Plosov showed that any node with BGP access could actually sniff those emails for domain validation and therefore get access to SSL certs as well. I don't think he realized that he had done that, but yeah, that's still out there. But the big SSL hack of 2008 was what Stevens and Soderov did last year with MD5. And it can be summarized as when a certificate authority or country deems you worthy of a certificate or passport, it signs, creates a passport with a hologram, your public key, your photo. Now, signing requires two things. First, you have to securely hash the certificate, summarizing it down to a small number of bits. And the hash is considered secure if it's just too difficult to find another file with the same hash. And second, you sign that particular hash with the CA's private key. Now, the problem is that Rapid SSL was, among other things, using MD5 as the hashing algorithm before the signature. MD5 is not secure. We've known MD5 is not secure since about 1996. We're still 95? When did we? 96, 95. Too long. Still using it. So, finally blew up in our face. Stevens with Lenstra actually created a new sort of collision attack. We had collision attacks in 2005 from Xiaoyun Wang. We really should have stopped using MD5 then. We didn't. The Stevens and Lenstra contribution was what was called chosen prefix, where if you have two different beginnings, you can create a magic blob that when appended will cause them to have the same hash. So Alex's attack was very elegant. They took a CA, they took Rapid SSL, had them sign a certificate, generate a certificate based off a PKCS 10 request, generate a certificate that looked nice and innocent and had a totally valid CN, and then when the actual certificate arrived, signed, they would swap out the nice content for the malicious content and replace and have the blob in place such that the hash would stay the same. And with the hash the same, the signature from the safe version would work on the unsafe version. Now, this actually required some really interesting work to manage the serial number. They had to actually request the certificate at the exact right second in order to get all the bits to align. So it took them a few months. They got a working intermediate. Great. Now, it turns out, and hackers, you can finally wake up now. It turns out there's more where that came from. X509 is a remarkably fragile piece of work. I had no idea. At pretty much every depth it's examined, ambiguities and risks are found. Consider hashing functions. Yes, MD5 is still supported, but it's not the only insecure hashing function in there. We also have MD2. MD2 is the predecessor function MD5, known now to be even less secure. If a certificate is signed with MD2 RSA, everything will accept it. Now, this shouldn't matter. Stevens and Soderov required a CA to actively sign specially formed blobs with MD5 RSA in order to exploit the insecurity of MD5. Now, there's nothing signing with MD2 RSA anymore. There hasn't been since 2001. So everything should be okay, right? Well, we do have an exception. I'm calling this now, I'm curious what you think, I call it the final destination theory of cryptographic vulnerabilities. The reality is that crypto vulns, they're really subtle. They're telegraphed years and sometimes decades in advance. We don't know how they'll burn us. We don't know when they'll burn us. But we do know that we're going to get burned. And it'll probably be ridiculous how it happens. So that's why I call it the final destination theory. So we begin this by seeing that one of VeriSign's core root certificates is self-signed with MD2. This is just where it begins. The first question that really should come to your mind is, why do self-signatures exist? There's no actual function for that signature except to make parsing libraries from the 90s happy. They've just been there. It's an assertion. I am me, says I. It's, I have a passport issued by Dan Kaminski. Would you like to accept it? It's totally meaningless. It has no purpose. The thing should not even exist. And yet, it's there on every single certificate that isn't linked to the certificate authority system. And it is, in fact, even there on the root certificates that are not trusted because of the certificate, but they're trusted because they were specially installed by Microsoft or Netscape or so on. So, we're not using it, but it keeps the parsing library happy, and there's crypto, so it must be safe. Now, why MD2 specifically? Again, the 90s. The 90s, we were young, we needed the bits. It's
very efficient on 8 bits.
Look, Peter Gutman had this great explanation. He's like, look, VeriSign, as of March 98, still issuing certificates with an MD2 hash, despite the fact that this algorithm has been deprecated for some time. This may be because they have hardware, the PBN safekeepers, which can only generate the older type of hash. So on one level, VeriSign had no choice. Their hardware just wouldn't let them do anything. And why would their hardware be so configured? Well, because as of mid-90s or late 90s security theory, MD2 was the slowest hash algorithm, therefore it had to be the most secure hash algorithm. Let's just be positive and say we've learned a lot. Now, it turns out there are many ways that a hashing function can break. As I said, in 2005, we had our collisions from Xiaoyun Wang, where you started from nothing and could make two things have the same hash. There was the chosen prefix, where you could start from two different things and make them have the same hash. And then there's a class of attack called the pre-image attack. Given a hash, create something new with that hash. Now, SHA-1 has no problems here. We're not getting a pre-image attack against SHA-1 anytime soon. Nor with MD5, nor with MD4, nor with MD2 has some problems here. So the attack kind of looks like this. What we would have to do in order to exploit the VeriSign MD2 root, we're going to generate a new intermediate certificate that says we're God. We can do whatever the heck we want. That's nice. Anyone can generate a certificate. We have to get a signature for it somehow. What we're going to do is we're going to use the pre-image attack to make our certificate have the same MD2 hash as the actual root. Now, once it has the same MD2 hash as the actual root, you can go ahead, grab that self-signature that has no legitimate purpose, and transfer it onto the intermediate, where it has a wonderful purpose. And now, you have an intermediate, it is signed by the root, and certainly nothing is checking to see that the MD2 hash on the intermediate is the same as the MD2 on the root. Now, this is how the attack will work. Because we had, for the first time, a little bit of time. The complexity of this attack was 2 to the 104 in 2004. It was 2 to the 97 in 2005. It was 2 to the 73 in 2008. We've done 2 to the 63 attacks. Now, I'm going to show you a Excel graph here. How about we not do what we did with MD5 and wait until it absolutely blew up in our face? I went to a lot of vendors and said, look, guys, you see the trend. This is going to fail. We know exactly how it's going to fail. We know exactly how it's exploitable. And we know it's going to have fairly catastrophic effects. Instead of doing the big chaos emergency patch, oh my god, drama thing, why don't we just shut off this useless hashing function we're not using anyway? And they said okay. It's gone from OpenSSL. It'll be completely gone in August. Firefox. It's already gone from latest NSS 3.12.3, so Firefox 3.5 already distrusts MD2. Firefox 3.0 series will get integrated reasonably fast. Red Hat has already shipped new NSS into their distributions. VeriSign, last I heard, is reissuing that certificate with a SHA-1 self-signature. Remember, nothing is using this self-signature, but fine. Have your frickin' cert, just don't let it be MD2. Last I talked to Opera, they were waiting on VeriSign. Apple and Microsoft are testing fixes. Google actually owns the stack for Android, so they are going to go ahead and remove MD2 from Android. And GNU TLS was actually very nice, and they said at some point years ago, why the hell are we supporting this hashing algorithm anyway? So for once, we did not wait until the friggin' bear ate us. Cooperation is good. There are some fun ways this one blows up. We actually have a really interesting thing available on this particular route, which is client authentication. So for all those smart cards that are out there, when the MD2 preimage attack happens, you're going to get to log into boxes as whoever you want. Now, I know what you're saying. You're saying, Dan, no one would possibly have this certificate in their certificate trust list. Well, the funny thing about SSL, now certificate trust list is the list of routes that are allowed to assert arbitrary identities. Think of it as the list of countries that the United States will respect passports from. They're not respecting passports from, Dan Kaminski land. Well, it turns out that SSL will actually tell you what it is trusting. And if you actually look at the default certificate trust list issued by IIS, you actually see everything with the client authentication tag. So it shows up. This goes back to what I said about X509 and exclusion. It doesn't matter if your CA runs you through the ringer. It doesn't matter if you have to fill out 80 forms in triplicate in order to get your CA to assert your identity. If the server accepts some other CA, you're subject to its security level. Now, this was not actually a characteristic of the route that RapidSSL had. So that's why it didn't come up earlier. I do want to defend VeriSign a little. This was not actually their problem. There were lots and lots of people who just making sure I know what time it is. Yeah, there were lots and lots of people who were using MD2 in this way up even until 2001. Now, these certificates have all expired. Doesn't matter if you can get to an MD2 preimage, you can change the expiration date. But it does matter that these things have not actually been useful on the internet for like 7 years. So you'd think that they'd be gone from the internet forever, and there's no way that a mass scan for SSL servers would actually find one of these other MD2 hosts. There is like one. maybe two, but mostly one. I think there was one that was still online. Now, there's going to be about 10 people in the room, maybe more, who understand why this is completely epic Final Destination. But I'm just going to show this and see who gets it, and you all get cookies. Really? For those not in the know, Rubicon is the only con in American con history where the audience was led out, frog marched. And somehow Rubicon Research in Tennessee, very neighborly, was the thought example. So, if you're thinking that there should be some sort of panic, I know press loves panic. No panic. I actually went to talk to Bart Pernille at University of Leuven in Belgium. Beautiful place, incredible beer. See, that's my judge of the place. Mm-hmm. Lens advisor. And his response after hearing this is that it was very interesting, but there's not likely to be a public pre-image attack of less than 2 to the 63 complexity within the next 6 months, even with this knowledge dispersed. And commented specifically that memory requirements also are going to have to be shrunk to make this attack valid in the real world. So, cool. We don't need to push the emergency sync button. We don't need to freak out. We don't need to pressure people. But, hey, can we fix this? And for the most part, everyone said, okay. This can be an easy, straightforward fix. It's not a complicated one to do. That being said, I do want to point out it's an offline attack. It's not like you have to keep hammering a CA with weird stuff, like I've been doing. It's an offline attack, so you can just basically take the route that's in every browser and keep chugging away till you get your new Magic Intermediate. So, speaking of existing CAs, I mean, there's some fun here. Why is everybody calling me in the middle of my own talk? All right, so almost like something's going on out there. So speaking of existing CAs, my God, it's a pain in the ass to run a secure CA. There's so much that can burn you. As far as I can tell, if it's ambiguous in X509, it is exploitable in X509, and OpenSSL really does not make it easy to write a secure CA. So let me walk you through the CA pipeline. The user goes ahead and generates a public and private key, submits some sort of X509 subject name with a public key attached as well. Now, in an X509 subject name, you have country and city and organization and organizational unit and a bunch of useless stuff that the designers of X509 thought would be helpful. The only thing that is actually validated by browsers is the common name. The X509, there's a field called common name. It is your website. That's the thing that they have a way to validate because they can go to DNS. That's their general security model, at least now anyway. Didn't start out like that. If the CA approves of the common name, they can do one of two things. They can, this is the secure option that actually most people do now, generate a certificate with the validated components of the X509 subject name, so just the CN as validated through DNS, or they can do the easy route, sign the certificate with the X509 subject name intact. Now, the easy ways to use OpenSSL to build a CA. Well, you could just sign a key, and then you actually get this output that says what you signed in text form, which you can then parse. So, go look for CN equals and take that string. You could dump the PKCS10 request to text and parse it, which gives you something like this. Or you could dump the generated certificate. So you got a request, you dumped it before, now you take the generated certificate and you dump it, and you see the subject in there. Now there's a really obvious attack for this strategy. You just go ahead and put extra, weird strings in that make it look like another CN is there. And what you get in byte for byte accurate mode is a injection, like LDAP injection, like SQL injection, like any, where you actually end up with bad guy inc cn equals www.badguy.com. That entire string is the organization, is the O. Now, OpenSSL has modes that filter this out, that do commas and escapes and all sorts of stuff. In fact, every other mode But the default is secure against this. Damn. Now, there's something that should bring an idea to your mind just seeing this. There's actually two common names in that string. There's the common name that was injected, www.badguy.com. There's also the common name at the end, www.bank.com. Which wins? Well, it turns out the which wins question gets even more interesting from the perspective of, let's say you have a legitimate certificate, and this legitimate certificate has multiple common names in it. I mean, you can have an organization in there, you can have a country in there, there's all sorts of stuff you can put in there. What if common names showed up 2 or 3 times? How do things respond? It turns out the answer is every possible way. OpenSSL will pick the first CN, usually. Crypto API is actually all-inclusive, so any CN in the certificate is acceptable. And NSS and Firefox will actually go for the last common name, thank you very much. Now, the first thing you might ask is, isn't there an answer in the RFCs about which should win? Well, yes. Somebody finally dug something up. It's 2 words, it's in parentheses, it's most specific, which is not actually defined in any RFC. So, first, all-inclusive, last, fail. Now I said that OpenSSL usually accepts only the first. It is possible with the OpenSSL APIs to get all possible CNs. They were aware of this. They designed the API such that you would repeatedly run X509 get name get index by NID and name get entry and run it until it fails. This is what you're supposed to do. Okay, this is what everyone actually does. They call X509 name get text by NID and they give it a subject, they give it a NID common name as the identifier, and the output goes into data with a max of 1,024 bytes. This exact code is SQL clause, OpenX, wget, Bacula, Neon, OpenLDAP. I did not actually find an OpenSSL consumer that looked for all certs. So a CA that uses this particular API would only see and thus validate the first common name. So what would you do with this? Well, the obvious thing is to try to abuse wildcards, because it's always great to be able to make a cert for anything. Netscape and Internet Explorer have fundamentally different policies on wildcards. Netscape has an unlimited wildcard policy. If you ever get a cert for star, you win. IE is pretty sure that if it ever sees a cert for star, a hacker's involved. And it says, wait, that's just too good a cert. Someone screwed up. So what you end up having to do in IE, and I've heard rumors that there's better, but I'm not going to talk rumors. You can have 3 CNs in one PKCS10 request. CN for attacker.com to trick OpenSSL, a CN for bank.com for Internet Explorer, and a CN for star for Netscape. So you'll end up with Netscape getting the last one, it's star. You'll end up with OpenSSL getting its first, attacker.com, and IE doesn't care, it'll pick any of them, so it takes the middle. Now what is a CN anyway? Well, X509 is written to ASN1, which is something of a precursor to XML. It is designed to be very, very fast to parse. Okay, actually it's very, very fast to crash under fuzzing. 2002, the Protos project fuzzed SNMP and destroyed pretty much every router on the planet. In a PKCS10 listener, every CA has an ASN1 listener parsing arbitrary blobs. Now, we hardened most of the ASN1 stacks in general just because we had to do it for SNMP. But oh God, if there's any ASN1 parsers out there that were not hardened in the SNMP push, we didn't find any, but yeah, we're a little worried. This is also a path for SQL injection. This is a great story. XKCD helped secure part of the internet. I did not know this till like 3 days ago. What happened was this. There was a comic they had of a kid named Little Bobby Tables. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Little Bobby Tables. If you put his name into a database, you lose the database of all your students. His name is a SQL injection. So Little Bobby Tables was seen by a bunch of guys in the certificate world who were like, that is so cool. What if someone did that to us? They realized really quickly you could have a common name of, Bob Drop Tables Certificates. And apparently word got around a few years ago. You might want to worry about this. But this is fun. So, in ASN 1, you don't actually have common name or organization or all those things. They're language, they're English dependent, they're hard to localize, they're hard to canonicalize. You get all of the pain of XML. They basically said, they came first, they basically said, hey, let's just have, for our critical identifiers, let's have canonical numbers. So, 2543. So 2543 is the OID, the object identifier for common name. How is this encoded actually on the wire? What we have is what's called ASN1 BER, the basic encoding rules. This is a way of putting ASN1 bytes on the wire. It is a tag length value file format, and so what it is you have a tag, some number, and then a length, how long your message is going to go for that tag, and then some amount of bytes. So for OIDs, they do something very special. They encode their numbers in what's called base 128. If the high bit is set, that means this number is another position of this big endian number. So let's say you have 6. Well, that's the number 6. If you have 86, that means this is a 6, and there's another digit after this one. So, for example, very simply, 2543 encodes to 6, object identifier, 3, length equals 3, 55, don't ask, somehow that means 2.5. Yes, they actually tried to compress bits. 04 is a 4, 03 is a 3. So, 6, 3, 55, 4, 3 is a common name, usually. A more complex OID might be the OID for RSA encryption, and we still have the same object identifier type. We have a length of 9, but now we have 2A, which is 1.2, and 8648. Subtract 80 from 86, and you get 6. It's the leftmost position, it's only 1, so 6 times 128 plus 72 equals 840. So 1, 2, 840. Do the same here, you end up with 113549, and then 111. So the way you encode the identifier for 1, 2, 840, all of this is 6928864886F7OD0101. So if you want to have an SSH key fingerprint, you can. So there's a couple fun things that you can do. The first thing that you can do is a leading zero attack. Now we've seen these before. Usually they just cause things to crash. But in this condition, we have 6.3 for tag length, value 55, 4, and then instead of just 3, we have 83. And this is 0 times 128 plus 3, which is still 3. So let's say you actually provide a PKCS10 request that contains, or let's say you have a certificate that contains 25403. What happens? Well, it depends on your API. OpenSSL, not fooled at all. It actually does see it as 2543, but it does not render it as a common name. Netscape is very similar. It also sees it as 2543, but it does not actually trigger the common name parsing. Crypto API sees it as a common name just fine. So, there are actually other things besides 2543 that are 2543. Also entertaining, semantic integer overflows. This was fun. One of the most common vulnerabilities in software is the integer overflow. Programmers forget that if you add enough to a number or multiply a number too large, it will actually loop back to 0. So you have all sorts of things where memory allocations go from bigger, 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 bigger. You didn't need any memory anyway. No, that's actually never good. So we have this algorithm, place value algorithm, where we keep multiplying by powers of 128. What happens if we have a really big number? What if you have 254, 2 to the 64 plus 3? Well, OpenSSL has what's called a big num library. There is no limit. It does not have integer overflows here anyway. It actually just says, oh yeah, that's 254, 236118, blah, 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 nothing useful. Causing noise over there, Len?
I'm pouring you water, man.
You are my hero. I'm so thirsty. All right. Netscape overflows, but not exploitably. Netscape does see that as 2543, but it doesn't hit their common name sensor. Does hit IEs though. No problem. That being said, realistically, most CAs do the right thing. They extract the CN, throw away the rest. Good for them. There's like 50 to 150 out there. I don't think we got them all. So, even if we ignore that, is there anything malicious we could get into the CN? Well, we can't throw that out. That's what we're actually validating. So, what's in a common name anyway? Well, you have an OID, 2543. You have a printable string, a string that is www.docspara.com. Type 13, and then it's just a length and a bunch of bytes. What could be exploitable in there? Well, there are actually 13 different string types in ASN1. We could have some fun with one of them. Turns out there's actually there is a trivial read AV in OpenSSL. OpenSSL had some code that said, you know, we're just going to keep going over this string until we hit the last byte, and we're going to assume that a multi-byte, so you can have multi-byte characters, 2 characters or 4 characters, we'll just keep advancing by 2 or 4 until we hit the last byte. Yeah, so if you're advancing by 4 bytes, but there's only 7 bytes in the string, you're going to run over your terminator. You're going to miss it. However, to OpenSSL's credit, their design was solid. They were not actually writing any memory after they hit their overflow. So they got away with it. But yeah, it's always fun when you're messing around with certificates and your parser starts crashing. So there are 2 ways of ending a string of text, and there's an interesting site that's coming in about a minute. So if you know, I just found out. Thank you, Alex. There are 2 ways of ending a string of text: with an explicit length field, ASN1 style, or with a null terminator. So what happens when you put a null terminator into a CN? A null terminator is a mark that says, you know, this you're done with the string here. It's okay. If you use OpenSSL, that null terminator actually gets converted to a \x00. So if you're doing a string analysis, you'll see that this is part of the OXOO domain. So domain validation actually goes to OXOO, but the certificate is actually parsed as defcon.org. So that's how I actually did the defcon attack. Now it turns out Moxie, Marlin Spike, we've both been playing with this at the exact same time without knowing the other one was playing with it. So huzzah to simultaneous research. But yeah, and it would have been trivial to do this for starnull.docspara.com.
That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I just didn't want that kind of trouble on me. So I'm pretty genuinely worried about this bug. This is actually CVE 2009-2408. Most CAs should be clean by now. We made a whole bunch of noise, but we really want this client side. So Netscape, the latest NSS already contains the fix. So Firefox 3.5, this does not work. And Firefox 3.0 will be moved to 3.2.1.3 very soon. So these null search will just not work on the client side. Opera's coming soon. IE and Safari they're both in testing as well. So last section of the talk. Told you a bunch of things that make me nervous about X509 and its fragility and its inappropriateness for the problems that we're facing now, both from a business side and just from a raw technology. You look at this thing wrong and weird things happen. I even talked about the fact there are no extensions to X509 you can actually depend on being in a particular client. So what am I saying? Am I saying the certificate authorities are unnecessary, a wart on the system? No. Actually, the certificate authorities are really useful. They're really energetic. Their business is doing this. They're just doing the best they can with a really fragile technology. Among other things, they really are the only entities that have sufficient local knowledge to do anything about what is a real problem, semantic name collision. We have all of our elite attacks, and then Moxie shows up with, hey, I'm just going to put a dash in the name, or a 1 in the name, or dot, extra dot, or append some stuff. And they're very simple, very straightforward attacks. They work. They work in the field. We need a way to know that bankofamerica.com with dashes is not actually Bank of America. DNS can't do this for us. DNS is not in the business of validating every name. That's one of the downsides of delegation. Other people own their own ranges, and if I want to have www.bankofamerica.com.doxpera.com, I get to do that. So extended validation is the mechanism that the CAs have come up with and worked with the browsers to actually deploy. Now this is good. This is what gives you that green bar experience in the browser. It's gotten some noise lately. Some people made some promises that the technology just could not follow through with. If someone has the DV version of a certificate for your site, if they actually have the certificate for www.bankofamerica.com gotten badly, there is no actual security boundary preventing them from attacking the green bar version. This is by design. By design, it is miserable, finally, contractually, to get an EV certificate. It has to be hard, it has to be difficult, or the thing offers absolutely no value. Now, if you needed to go through this entire process for the average of 10 or 15 different servers that it takes to run your average web page, you couldn't deploy EV at all. You would be having the perfect be the enemy of the good. Yes, I would like to have the DV certs excluded, but at the end of the day, I'm not willing to lose the protection against bank-of-america.com. So people are really surprised by this. And this was my experience with this for a while. 2 years ago, this got brought up by Adam Barth and Colin Jackson. I gave a shout out to it in my talk last year. I guess it really does take Mike Zussman and Alexander Sotorov. They have a really cool talk coming, and it's basically, hi, this security boundary doesn't exist, so we're just going to stomp it to pieces. And it's true. It works very, very well. You should go check out their demos. But what they're hitting on something the technology was not designed to do. All it handles is semantic collisions, but semantic collisions are so important to deal with, we need the CAs in order to enforce them. So what do we do? What does the actual end game start to look like? We've got to get the DNSSEC root signed. Even if we don't know where it's going to go, let's at least get this necessary prerequisite into place so that we can explore building a new PKI with a canonical root, with exclusionary powers, with delegation powers. I can't promise you that it'll work, but if it works half as well as DNS has for the last 25 years, given that it is the federated, multi-trusted identity system of everything else but trust, I think it'll end up okay. Once we get that done, we can start bootstrapping other protocols for cross-organizational trust. We can use DNSSEC for SSH, IPsec, PGP, even SSL, and listen to what happens if you put the hash of a cert into DNS. If the certificate is an EV cert, EV will still work. There's still a cert. It has all the magic fields. The browser can identify it. However, any other certificate does not actually have that hash, and you will finally be able to have EV with exclusion of invalid DV. So that will be nice. So, summary, X509 is messy. Operationally, it has lack of segregation and delegation, makes it really expensive to use, and forces some really painful decisions, up to and including requiring CAs to basically sell root certs. It sucks, but that's operationally what's been required. Technically, the technology is just oddly fragile. Like, I did not expect to find a semantic integer overflow, but it was there. The organizations, they're not malicious. They're not, twirling their fingers or mustaches. They're trying to do the best they can. They don't have a very good framework for it. Let's build them a better one. So that's what I got. I hope you liked it.